Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining me once again. Get a little smoke going. I was at the store the other day. I was looking at some different sage styles. There was one just big old gigantic sage. I got a little cold feet. I didn't pull the trigger on it. I've always felt like this stuff needs to find me a little bit. And I don't know where I got this. I've had it for a while. My mom has sent me a lot of stuff over the years. I think it's just from my travel, and she's always sent me stuff to essentially clean or cleanse the different spaces or different homes. I've lived in so many homes in my lifetime. And so you're always trying to get used to where you're at when you live nomadically. And one of the things that stands out to me a lot in modern society, and I think a lot of it is perception based. And one of the questions that I got today that I just pulled out right before the show is actually around perception. So the question is high pressure situations and my thoughts on how perception affects pressure, which I'm certainly going to get into and see what my thoughts around perception and pressure come about. But one of the things that when I think about our brains, and one of the things about modern society currently, is it seems to be that we have a sleep issue, and we tend to have something going on with sleep that tends to be bothering the modern human. And you have to leave space constantly for the thought of, well, it has to you have to leave space for, is this good or bad? What does this mean? What is sleep? What is good sleep? And sleep is, in my lane, sleep is incredibly crucial for working with athletes and working with high performers. And we're constantly talking about sleep. And you have to pay attention to, you have to really put your mind into what we're after when we talk about these necessities of life and these things that keep us going, and what is the deeper meaning of them. Because so much so commerce gets so a hold of all these things, and we create things that we need people to have problems in order to commercially sell certain things to them. Now, I think just generally thinking of a bed, right? I know when I first purchased my first bed in college, I was on my own. I think it might have been college or right after college. Might have been right after college. And I didn't have much money. And I was asking people what would be the top purchase of what I should get, what I should have. And I remember people telling me, get a really good bed, get a really quality bed. And I didn't have much money, and having a quality bed didn't make as much sense to me because I was a different person then. I was in my young 20s. So a lot of what I wanted to spend money on was gone out. And so if I could get a $400 bed over the $1,000 bed, which I remember that sounds pretty accurate on what people were suggesting. People were suggesting I should look at this $1,000 bed over the $350, $400 bed I was getting from Walmart or Costco. I can't remember, one of those big retail stores. And I went with the cheaper bed. And I remember I haven't made that bad of a decision. I haven't made that decision since. I've never, ever since I've gotten my own mattresses, or when I did have a home in Minnesota a couple of years ago, like the first things that I've done is seek out a good bed, especially when I travel a lot, especially when you're in and out of hotels, you're trying to find the best bed. And if I've been in a bed in a hotel recently in the last couple of years, there's even been times, I believe, where I've potentially changed rooms based off of the bed. Any homes that I'm renting or living in, if I find good sleep in the bed, those homes have created such positive things in my mind and in my memory. And I feel like life is really good when you sleep good. And so the mattress tends to make sense. So commerce can't all be bad. And I think that's why I'm coming to the concept of leaving space for all of these things. And we have things that we measure sleep. We have things that we use to quantify our sleep and see the sleep quality that we're having. I think that resides in things like the Aura Ring or the Whoop. And I know a lot of people that are close to me who love the Whoop, and they track their sleep daily, and they see where sleep is in their health aspect and how well they're sleeping, and they track it religiously. And I've used the Whoop. I've used the Whoop a few times. I think I've seen benefits in it, and I've seen things that have been that I haven't stuck with it substantially. I haven't continued with it, but I've used it from time to time, and I see where the benefit of it is. But in again, quality of sleep, getting that measured, I think that teaches us things about ourselves. Quality bed, being able to have a restful night's sleep, that I think that teaches a lot to us about ourselves. And again, why does this seem so difficult? We're talking about sleep. It's like breathing. For a lot of years, I've had people be so stressed out over the concept of trying to wrap their head around what a breathing coach is, because it's something we all do. And it does get poked fun at. And I think so does sleep. Sleeping gets poked fun at with a sleep specialist or sleep doctors or sleep, like I said, products. And yet it does seem kind of comical and funny that we have concerns over our breathing and things like sleeping. But then again, but is it? Because COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, is becoming one of the leading causes of death in the world. And we're starting to die because of our inability to breathe well. You look at heart disease has obviously been a massive product of death. And then you have cancer kind of, I believe that probably strongholds at the top, which could be led into the dysfunction of our cells. And so when you think of, well, how do we have a mitochondria? How do we have the basic functioning of our cells be healthy? Well, largely it comes from breathing well and being able to oxygenize our cell and have healthy tissue and feel oxygen within our body, having a healthy ratio of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and being able to function properly in real time. And then all of a sudden you look at, well, the massive recovery tool to how we exist day to day is sleep. And we don't sleep well because most of us we're starting to see so much sleep apnea in the world, and we're sleep dysfunction, sleep disturbances. We look at the pollution that's in our cities and in our world now with light and sound and just the disturbances that keep us up at night. Think of it, and that's kind of what brings me to the beginning of this thought with the world that I live in and the people that I see and experience regularly, is that maybe the world is sleeping well, but the people that I'm around travel. And the perception of our body and our mind, even myself, as I think of the amount of hotels I sleep in a year or the homes that I've slept in, the unconsciousness of my body has to get comfortable in all these unique settings on a regular basis. And I think that has a lot to do with when people are nomadic or people travel so often. I think that's why their sleep is so disruptive and it's not regulated, because ultimately the most basic form of sleep would be a cool environment, a dark environment, a sturdy foundation that your body feels comfortable on. The air is clean, and you do it regularly. You go to sleep at the same time, and you wake up at the same time. Usually this has a lot to do with the sun rhythms of where you're at in that time of the year. So in the winter, when the sun is not out as much, you would sleep more. And when the summer, when the sun is out more, you would sleep less. And I think that it's very easy to tell that you have most of your energy is sparked based off how often the sun is out. And when the sun is out longer, you have more energy compared to when it's out shorter. And that's the winter. Think of the winter solstice, the shortest days of the year. And think of how the moods are in those times of the year, your energy and how you think, and compared to where you're at 4th of July, when you're able to go off less sleep and really be rocking. But everything I just mentioned about sleep is its most simplest form. And because of where we are now, and go back to what I just said, dark, clean air, regular time, cool, and something sturdy, have a foundation. That's like sleeping in the cave, as natural as it could possibly be, which is probably one of the reasons why people feel so refreshed after doing things like camping. And it sounds so opposite of staying in these five-star hotels or being in our nice cozy homes, and yet we feel so alive and so awake when we're in those environments. And I think that's kind of where, again, it leads into the modern, just the problem that we constantly run into with our psychology, is that we're always constantly thinking we need to be solving problems. And innately, our problem solving makes everything convenient and comfortable. And so we just get fluffier pillows. We get more stuff that we accumulate inside. We build bigger buildings, more street lights, more street signs, more generators on homes. And we create such pollution. And so when we go to sleep, we are not sleeping soundly. We're not sleeping with high quality. And then we have these health disruptions, like I mentioned, COPD, sleep apnea. We have mental disturbance, mental distress. We have heart diseases. We're sick. We get colds. We get the flus throughout the year. We get allergies, and we really don't recover. And so something that now seems so laughable as a normal necessity has become a worldwide problem. And that's where commerce comes in, because a lot of our material world is driven by money. And so therefore, most of the things that we need to create in products, we try to solve people's problems. And so that's why I think you have so many gadgets around sleeping and how to provide the most restful, peaceful night's sleep. And I see so much of that in my lifestyle because of the nomadicness that I live, and the different beds that I'm in, and the different homes and the different hotels and Airbnbs and rentals that I experience. It's like going into a new cave regularly. And so my body has to adjust regularly. And I usually, when I'm the place I'm in right now, I'm starting to sleep regularly. I wake up regularly at the same time without an alarm clock. Now, obviously, I don't have demands with work on me as aggressively as I have had in different times, but you watch how naturally you fall into a routine and a habit, especially when you design the environment to be healthy and safe and clean. And I think that becomes really difficult when you're in a lifestyle that requires you to move and travel and change time zones, and you're messing with your rhythm around the sun. And so it becomes really difficult. And that's where we can get confused, because we once again have to pay attention to the space in which we're holding, from the artistic side of ourselves, the understanding of ourselves, our own self-awareness, and then the commercial use of society and the material need of money and commerce and the battle within, right? Because we're clearly going to continuously try to solve our issues, and that routinely, regularly brings us back to convenience. And then the convenience that we create for ourselves, the comfort that we create for ourselves, ends up being our demise. And that's where you have to really ask yourself those questions. How can society now, that supposedly has the most technology ever and the most resources ever, the most comfortable space ever, have sleep issues? How can we have Whoop and technologies that teach us about our sleep, yet we still can't sleep? And so we're so overeducated, we're so overinformed, that we don't even know how to keep it as simple as humanly possible, as we originally slept in caves. Now, once again, I don't know what it was like thousands of years ago. Did they have the best Whoop scores? Were their circadian rhythms perfect? Was their physiology just magically perfect? I obviously don't know. But right now, according to statistics and stats and what we have in our health, is we're definitely not aligned with the natural world, and it's disrupting these basic necessities. So once again, we're in a conundrum of thought. We're questioning ourselves because we laugh at the such simple aspects of sleep as seemingly non-pressing into something that we should pay attention to. And yet it falls so underneath our conscious awareness that we have billions of dollars of industries that make money off of how badly we sleep. It's the same thing with breathing. We're horrendous breathers. And if you look at I obviously have talked about this a few times, but when you look at the anatomy or the change of our breathing, Did that happen from the industrial age? I mean, there's a lot of literature that would show that the jaw has started to change over the last couple hundred years, which came as a byproduct of our sedentary lifestyles, our industrialization, our living indoors, our poor air quality, the processed foods that we were eating, obviously the softness of foods that we were eating. It all just devolved the jaw, which made us narrow jaws, crooked teeth, and all of that created chronic mouth breathing. And when you breathe through your mouth, you don't oxygenate your tissue, you don't oxygenate your body, you overstimulate your nervous system naturally by just the way in which you're breathing, because the chances are you're breathing more, you're overbreathing, and that overstimulates your CNS. So now all of a sudden your body can go from this acute alarm system of fight or flight, and it can find itself in a chronic state of fight or flight. And I think that's where largely a lot of I don't know if prediction is the right word, but that's where largely a lot of the thought behind the modern mental health demise has come from, specifically in the breathing world, is that we've become these unnatural breathers because we're living this unnatural life. We're so disconnected from nature that our nervous systems are out of whack and we can't help ourselves but be in mental distress. And then the wild part about it is that we can know these things, read these things, have research to these things, again, see the statistics of things. And it's like we buy more to try to solve these extreme simple problems. But do I have an answer to any of this? Not really, because what are we going to do? Are we going to dismiss the massive cities that we've built and tear down all the skyscrapers and all go live under the stars and make our communities tents and sleep in our neighbors, and we're all in these tents sleeping on the ground, breathing through our nose, having clean air? I don't think that's really going to happen. So I don't know. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your thoughts are. So the question of today was high pressure situations. So high pressure situations, so this is towards me. So what are my thoughts on how our perception affects pressure? So we have to think of a high pressure situation. This came to me from a coach, I believe. So I believe this is directed specifically at sports. So a high pressure situation in sports, what are my thoughts of how perception affects pressure? What are my thoughts on how perception affects pressure? Well, most recently I interviewed Brandon Crawford. If you guys are familiar with him in the baseball world, he just recently retired. He spent 14 years in the big leagues. 13 of them, I believe, were at the San Francisco. Well, I know his last year was with the Cardinals. All his other years were with the Giants. So it had to have been 13 years with the San Francisco Giants when his last one with the Cardinals. This guy has the franchise record of starts for the San Francisco Giants at shortstop, and which is incredible, right? And we talked a lot about high pressure situations. And one of the things that he said to me that stood out to me largely was he talked about hearing the crowd. Now, when I first got into Major League Baseball and I was coaching Major League Baseball players regularly, one of the things that I noticed directly from somebody who was going to make it or had made it, we'll say, perceivably, in what is making it, let's just call it somebody who made it to free agency, someone who made it through all the arbitration years and sort of got free of what teams could have control over, and they create a free agency route. So we'll bucket this somewhere in completed 5 seasons to potentially 8. We'll call it in a 5 to 8 frame, because I don't think there's that many people who have played 9, 10, 11 years of professional sports. I think once you're in that 10-year club, you're sort of made it. And I think in the big leagues, it's at 8 years, they give you the gold card. So let's say that. Let's go with 8 years. So somebody who's made it 8 years in comparison to someone who's in their first 2 to 3 years or even their rookie year, and how they're perceiving high pressure. One of the things that I noticed drastically was people who notice sound. and they notice, I call it the glitter of Major League Sports. They saw the mysticalness of sports, and the mysticalness of this was breaking them. And really what happens is that the pressure amounts to being too much. And I think that that comes back to the question, where the question is my thoughts on how perception, so I'm highlighting the word perception, affects pressure. I think that when people get up there so early and they're not going to make it, their perception is that it is pressure, and they see the crowd. And I've talked to players about this in the big leagues and when they're new to the big leagues, is that when you see and notice the crowd, you see and notice obstacles. And I don't know if this is innate necessarily, or how we get to these certain thoughts or these perceptions to be successful. But that is something that I don't understand of people that I've met who've played 10 years professionally. That is something they don't seem to notice. They don't seem to notice the crowd, and they've moved past it. Now, I bring up Crawford because if you go and listen to Crawford's podcast, he talks about, he got called up in 2011. I don't know, he played in like 60 some games, I think. But his first full year was 2012. He broke camp in 2012 in the big leagues with the Giants, and he was starting at shortstop. And he had a rather difficult first month and a half with the team. And the GM and one of the coaches had pulled him aside and told him if he wasn't going to be able to defensively play better, that they were actually going to let him go. I don't know if they'd let him go, but they were definitely going to send him down, is the way he told the story. And he turns the season around. He had 12 errors in the first month and a half, and then the rest of the season he had 6 errors. So we'll say 4 to 4.5 months, he has 6 errors. In a month and a half, he has 12. So he cuts his errors in half with double the sample size in games, if you will. In that year, in his first full year of being a shortstop, the San Francisco Giants won the World Series in 2012. And I think that sums up a lot of the question of perception around pressure, because the thing that he had said to me that is sometimes hard to wrap your head around, but I think it answers this question beautifully, is that he talked about how over the course of his career, when he slumped at the plate, not necessarily in the field, he's unbelievable. I mean, he won multiple Gold Gloves. I think he has 4 Gold Gloves. He was a 3-time All-Star appearance guy, and he definitely found a lot more confidence in his defense than his offense, but wasn't a bad hitter either. So I think he's got a Silver Slugger award, and you're not an all-star if you can't do both. So, I mean, in the first year I ever met him in 21, he crushed, had a great year at the plate. But he had said that when he noticed and heard the crowd hitting, when he was hitting, he could hear the crowd. That was when he was slumping. That was when he was having bad games. That was even when he heard the crowd before the at-bat or going up to the at-bat or during the at-bat. The results were statistically, they were not in favor of Brandon Crawford. They were the opposite. And I had mentioned if he had felt like that when he first got in the big leagues and when his first full year in the big leagues in 12. I can't remember exactly what he said to that, but it was in the same idea, the same perspective, that the perception of hearing the crowd, feeling like this is too big, affected the pressure that he was feeling. And I think when we are in those states, now obviously, I'll go back to this, but obviously when he didn't hear the crowd, perceivably, because there's still a crowd there externally, when he perceivably did not hear the crowd or see the crowd, metaphorically, not even metaphorically, literally, then he was in the game. And he didn't feel like the pressure was there. And if you listen to that episode, I spend like an hour trying to get more out of that, because I think one of the things that I struggled with as a player was I did hear the crowd. And I think of specifically I never played in the big leagues, but I remember one time in the minor leagues, I was playing in Dayton, Ohio, and they were a sold out crowd regularly. I think they'd set like a professional record of consistent sold out crowds. And so when we played there, my family came in for that, and I had my whole family, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my parents, my friends were there. And before that game, I was really egotistically excited because I wanted people to see me in that arena, not the arenas where there were 1,000 people at the games. I wanted them to see me pitch in front of whatever it was, 10 to 12,000 people, because I felt like they would think higher of me. And it's hard not to feel like that It feels different when you're in a 40,000. It feels different when you're at Dodger Stadium. There's 50,000 people in comparison to when you're in Tampa and there's 5,000 people. And I think that's just natural cause. But I think this is all coming together is when I pitched. Fortunately, I threw really well in Dayton that day, and it felt awesome to perform in what other people perceived as pressure. Maybe I was so ingrained in showcasing my skills to my family and friends that day that I was able to move past it. But I remember standing on the mound one time in that 4 or 5 outing appearance that I had, and I sat and just stared at the whole crowd. And I thought of how cool it was that I was pitching in front of, like I said, thousands of people. In that inning, I gave up a home run. And I had to check back in, which fortunately for that specific game, I was capable of doing that. But for the longevity of my career, towards the end of my career, I had a really hard time not feeling pressure because I was so close to making it to the big leagues. And my perception of it was too overwhelming. I couldn't work on my craft or my art and master myself and showcase my skills because I was so consumed on the external. That was the opposite of Crawford. All I saw was the crowd, and all I saw was the advertisements and the logos and the branding and the fans and all the stuff. And I think that aggressively shut my career off short. With Crawford, he only had minimal times in his career, in a 14-year career, where he was able to understand that he acknowledged the crowd. And so that is an individual perception in which he could hear and see the things going on externally around him that was outside of the game that amounted to greater pressure, which regularly, if you guys are watching sports, you see this you're going to watch this in the NFL playoffs. You're going to watch it. You watch it in March Madness. You watch it in any playoff. You watch it in Super Bowls, World Series. You see the pressure get to people. And the best way I can explain it, and from what I've seen and studied and gathered, is that the athlete in this scenario, their perspective is outside of the work itself. They're seeing the crowd instead of the pitch. They're hearing the crowd instead of themselves. And I would love to say this is incredibly easy to not do, but I think that's the point of pressure. The point of pressure for our own spiritual pursuit is, can the pressure pull outside of us what we really are and bring us closer to who we are? Because when we're connected to ourselves, authentically speaking, whether it's a physical sport or it's a mental meeting or you're giving a speech or you're doing a conference or whatever, I think when you are connected to yourself at the fullest and you are immersed into your craft, your perception is that, and it's in a flow state and it's not getting externally poked. The stimulus outside of that, it'd be like, if you can imagine, it'd be like your own inner circle, your own life, your own reality. And then there's an outer ring outside of that, this other reality. And for players who are early and new into professional sports, they are consumed in this outer reality. And that outer reality, as you can imagine, is going to end up naturally eating them and hurting their performance. And so the pressure will, in this sense, will have gotten to them, and it will have demised their career. And I think that's what makes us admire people who have sustained such incredible work for so long. Person that just popped into my head thinking about this in a non-sporting sense is Dave Chappelle. When I listen to Dave Chappelle, I can just tell that it feels like in front of thousands of people, it feels like he's talking and telling jokes in his living room. And I've always admired that confidence, that perception of reality, that realness, that authenticity. How does he get there? I can't speak to that because I'm not Dave Chappelle. How did Brandon Crawford get to there? I don't know because I'm not Brandon Crawford. I've seen it in other people, and I've seen failures in myself, and I've seen successes in myself. And if I can tie it up, I think the perspective that affects pressure directly is the closeness and the degree of faith and trust in the relationship that you have with your own soul. And if you feel untrustworthy of self, if you're lacking belief and faith in self, then I think that you notice pressure on an extremely higher level. And when you are closest to yourself, when you are, I'm not saying this is ever completion, what I'm saying, because even Crawford acknowledges the moments that he failed even later in his career. And he notices again, like I said, the crowd. And I'm guilty of this too. And I'm sure Dave Chappelle is at moments in his life as well. But that's the art of mastery. The longer you can continuously stay in your lane and work on your craft and continuously master it, that pressure starts to dismantle itself and get smaller into just that inner circle, which is you. And that, I think, is the process of carving out our mastery throughout our crafts. So does that have to be sport? No, I think that's why sport is a great teacher, but it can be anything. It can be being a parent, I would imagine. But I think that's how our perception affects pressure. I think it just is a direct reflection of how in those moments when it's either perceived good or bad materially, because that, what is good or bad materially? I could talk about how bad my baseball career was when I was in the minor leagues, but if it weren't for the negative results of my professional baseball career, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. And I wouldn't be able to answer this question the way I'm answering it now. And I wouldn't have put in so much time on understanding myself and how to not minimize pressure, how to thrive in it and how to be myself in it and be connected to my own voice within it. And I actually credit so much of my current success and success that I've had over the years revolving around pressure and my perception to pressure because of who I was not, I guess, when I played professional sports, because I was so disconnected from myself that my perception enhanced pressure. And now when I feel pressure, it's just like a little reminder that I'm on the path to becoming more of who I am. And so, and I don't know, there's quotes all the time of, there's a quote, pressure is a privilege. I guess I would agree with that on what I just said. I think now I've found pressure to become more and feel more as a privilege than the opposite. I think when pressure feels like a privilege, you're probably on the path to becoming more of who you are. When pressure feels intimidating and it's scaring you, it's a good thing. Probably should go down it. You're most likely going to fail materially, but that failure comes in the form of lessons, as we know. I mean, the great sages of our lives would say that, that's how we acquire wisdom of self. So I don't think any of it could actually become good or bad. I think it's just a beautiful thing that we experience in material time that exposes us to who we really are. And based off of our perception and our connection, that's what affects the amount of pressure. That would be my answer. Other than that, find good, clean places to sleep. Make sure the air quality in your home is good so that you can breathe through your nose calm and quietly through the night. Make sure that your curtains are closed. You have a blacked out room. Make sure the temperature is clean. Things are clean in your home. Make sure your environment is clean. Make sure you're trying to go to sleep as best as you can at the same time every night, waking up at the same time every morning. Make sure when you get up in the morning, you get underneath the sun and you get the sun into your eyes. That those eyes are connected to your brain, which signals your circadian rhythm. You sort of prepare for sleep actually at the night for when you start your mornings. And then throughout the day, make sure you're aware of breathing through your nose. Super crucial to breathe through your nose. It heals the body. It humidifies the air. It oxygenates our tissue. And it's just, go if you want to do research on your own, just go type in nose breathing versus mouth breathing and do a deep dive into the difference of those two. All right. Check you guys later. Take care.